when death came before the atomic bomb. Before Hiroshima and Nagasaki became symbols of nuclear death, Halifax had already endured a nightmare that needed no uranium, no warheads, no enemies, just human arrogance and carelessness pushing each other into the furnace. A collision between two seemingly harmless ships ended in one of the most savage explosions before the atomic age. The Halifax disaster proved that humanity doesn't need high-tech weapons to self-destruct. All it takes is stupidity. Two ships entered the same narrow strait destined to clash. One was a relief vessel, the other loaded with explosives. But more crucially, both were carrying a total disregard for warnings. Horn signals meant to resolve became declarations of defiance. Neither backed off. Neither yielded. No one remembered they were in Canada's most populated harbor. Disaster didn't come from the cargo hold. It came from the arrogance of those who believed they had the right of way. And then everything forgot. This isn't a war story. It's a story of failed governance, a society running on assumptions, trusting that everything will be fine. A port without regulations for explosive-carrying ships. A system with no checks, no alerts, no coordination. People didn't die because of enemies. They died from negligence disguised as routine. And Halifax, on that cold December morning, became a living graveyard for a lesson humanity still hasn't learned. When systems stay silent and citizens believe a lie. In March 17, Halifax was a key logistical gateway. War brought opportunity money and bustle, but it also birthed systemic arrogance. No rules were set for explosive-laden ships. No special control, no lane separation, no safety priority. Mont Blanc carried 2,900 tons of explosives, yet no one cared. They assumed danger couldn't happen on our side. But when systems believe they're immune, tragedy always comes to correct the illusion with human corpses. Here's the insanity. Neither the government, navy, nor citizens knew how dangerous Mont Blanc was. The captain banned smoking on board, but the port made no extra requests, no alerts, no seals, no evacuation guidance. Mont Blanc sailed into Canada's most populous city like a live grenade without a pin. Civilians weren't allowed to know. No announcements, no questions. People trusted the operating order over their instincts, and that misplaced trust killed thousands. The Halifax disaster wasn't a random act of fate. It was the direct result of real decisions, made by real people within a real system built on the thinking. It'll probably be fine. But when that probably meets the wrong moment and the wrong ship, it becomes destiny. A city disintegrated because no one dared to ask, "Is this going wrong?" We didn't die from an explosion. We died because an entire society nodded in agreement with a colossal mistake. When a blast of the horn becomes a declaration of war, Mont Blanc was in the correct lane. Imo wasn't. After dodging a few small ships, Imo decided to drift off course. A seemingly small maneuver placed both ships in the same narrow kilometer-long corridor, ominously named the Narrows. And then began a surreal standoff. Mont Blanc blasted one horn. "I have the right of way." Imo answered with two, "I won't yield." No one left the stage. In a world where arrogance steers the helm, every horn blast seals a tomb. Imo wasn't just in the wrong lane, it sped up. Ignoring basic maritime protocol, the captain decided to rush through. No radar, no air traffic control, just belief in being right. And Mont Blanc, instead of halting or turning, held course. Two massive metal hulls, weighing thousands of tons, charged each other with no brakes. Each saw the other as the obstacle. No one realized they were steering an entire city toward death. No one gave way. Why didn't anyone intervene? Because no one was placed between them. No one had the authority to break the chain reaction. No control center. No maritime lane supervision. When a system lacks a stop, everything switch accidents become fate. Halifax stands as proof that not all collisions come from speed. Some disasters arise from ego, and one horn, instead of saving lives, launched annihilation. When the fire was misunderstood, at 8:45 a.m., the ships collided. A gentle bump, no immediate deaths, no thick smoke, no explosion. Which is exactly why people let their guard down. Chemical barrels leaked. Solvents spread across the deck. Then metal scraped metal, a spark ignited. Flames rose from within the ship's hull. It wasn't a risk anymore. It was the beginning of catastrophe. But on shore, people didn't run. They approached. They watched. They assumed it was just a small fire. Crowds filled Halifax's harbor. Students skipped class. Families leaned out of windows to watch the fireworks. No one knew the ship carried 2,900 tons of explosives. No one warned them. No flags raised. No sirens blared. Mont Blanc's crew shouted, but language barriers and public apathy drowned their cries. People nearby had no idea they stood just hundreds of meters from ground zero. They trusted the silence, and that silence killed them. Fire crews from other ships arrived to help. They too had no idea they were entering hell. They saw it as duty, and none survived. The problem wasn't fire. It was information. When a society misjudges a deadly risk, even well-meaning actions turn catastrophic. Mont Blanc was morphing into a bomb, but Halifax saw a technical incident. No emergency protocol. No evacuation zone. Just deadly curiosity. When one person tried to scream through the silence, amid the oblivious crowd, one man ran back to the telegraph office. He didn't flee. Didn't wait for orders. He understood without a warning the incoming passenger train would be annihilated. He typed the final message. Stop the train. This may be my last message. Goodbye. That line saved 300 lives. He died in the blast. But that act lives on as proof that sometimes one person breaking the silence is enough to alter fate, while others abandoned ships, sat still, or waited for orders. He charged into danger. With one hand on the key, he severed the deadly chain for the passenger train. Outside, well-meaning citizens continued dragging hoses approaching Mont Blanc, with bravery, unaware they had less than 60 seconds left. Crowds still gathered. Children laughed. Adults pointed. No one realized that in mere moments Halifax would cease to exist. No sirens rang. No black flags raised. No sound loud enough to drown the complacency rooted in people's minds. And at exactly 9:04:35 a.m., the invisible bomb exploded. The sky tore open. 2,900 tons of TNT ignited. A shockwave 23 times the speed of sound obliterated everything. Ground zero hit 5,000 degrees. In less than a second, the city fell into eternal silence. People died without ever knowing why. When disaster comes not from the sky, but outdated thinking, the explosion erased 1,600 lives in a blink, over 9,000 injured, thousands blinded just by watching from windows, internal organs shredded, bodies torn apart before screams could escape. A blast without wartime explosives, just industrial ones, sitting in the heart of a crowded city. This was no act of God. It was man-made piece by people who believed risk belonged to tomorrow, not today. Halifax was wiped off the map as if it had never existed. 100 homes vanished. 12,000 more destroyed. Streets became seas of fire. Trees turned to charcoal. Coastal villages swept away by tsunamis. The Emo, once a relief ship, hurled ashore like a broken toy. Death made no distinctions. Elderly children, soldiers, civilians, all erased from humanity's roll call because no one imagined the worst-case scenario. More frightening, this wasn't a one-time accident. It was a pattern. Disasters born from human systems lacking fallback plans. Emergency scripts or preparation. Halifax's rapid growth outpaced its ability to manage itself. Like so many modern cities, when progress ignores safety, the price is always paid in blood. Halifax didn't explode. A world built on false stability did. When hell has a city's name, after the explosion, Halifax was no longer a city. It was a war zone. Bodies scattered everywhere. Shoes littered streets like hailstones. Walls collapsed, windows, shattered, fires smoldered. In minutes, a strategic global logistics hub turned to ash. The most haunting truth: everything destroyed could have been saved if just one person had made the right decision. No natural disaster ruined Halifax. Negligence did. And just when it seemed things couldn't get worse, a brutal blizzard struck. Heavy snow, bitter winds delayed aid. Survivors dug out loved ones with bare hands in sub-zero cold. Children became messengers. Elders carved wood into stretchers. Ordinary people became nurses. Workers, warriors. No system to lean on. Only the will to live. And though nations sent supplies, it was the people of Halifax who rescued themselves. In field hospitals, scenes resembled hell. Doctors stitched with fishing hooks. Patients lay crammed on floors. Moans, sobs, cries for loved ones echoed. But in the chaos, no one surrendered. Life continued at all costs. Some cities rebuild with money. Halifax resurrected with defiance. No one came out whole, but no one gave up. That made Halifax not just the site of tragedy, but the birthplace of human resilience. When justice fails the survivors, right after the blast, people needed a digestible story. So a rumor surfaced: Germany attacked Halifax. No proof, no logic, just blame and move on. But truth chose no side. There was no enemy, no attack. Just two ships, one off course, one carrying explosives, both failing to communicate. A port system with no warnings, no disaster protocols. The enemy wasn't offshore. It was in the neglect. Initially, Mont Blanc bore all the blame. Why? Because its crew survived. Most of its crew died. No one left to charge. So justice picked the easier path. Mont Blanc was blamed, shamed, cursed by the public. No one cared it had the right of way. They just needed someone to punish. In grief, reason shattered. A flawed verdict was immortalized as historic truth for years. Eventually, the courts dropped all charges for lack of evidence. But the people didn't forget. They didn't need proof, they wanted revenge. And when justice punishes the wrong target, it loses power. The real responsible parties, port managers, authorities, military, faced no consequences. Truth was buried. Survivors lived on with the feeling the system meant to protect them had abandoned them. That pain lasted longer than any wound. When one telegraph saved a generation, among the thousands tied to the disaster, one man is eternally remembered: the telegraph operator. No one told him what to do. No one asked him to return. But he did. As others fled, he moved toward the blast zone just to send one message: hold the train. Goodbye. He knew he might die. And he did. But because of him, 300 others lived. A man with no authority, yet the only one who truly saved lives. 80 years later, he was inducted into Canada's Railway Hall of Fame. A lighthouse was named after him, not to glorify, but to remind society: One voice breaking silence can save the future. Courage isn't the loudest shout. It's doing the right thing when everyone else is wrong. That operator carried no gun, no badge, no power. Yet he kept Halifax from burying 300 more. His lesson is for every civilization: never underestimate the value of individual action. A society doesn't collapse because one person failed. It collapses because hundreds saw failure and did nothing. And a society doesn't revive by command. It revives because individuals chose to act. He couldn't save all of Halifax, but he saved its soul. He proved not everyone stays silent, and sometimes one voice can drown out the blast. When memory is the only way to survive. Over 100 years later, every Christmas Nova Scotia sends a massive tree to Boston. Not for decoration, but remembrance. Of a disaster. Of gratitude. Of miraculous survival after doomsday. Halifax chose not to forget. They chose to live with memory. Because they understand to forget the past is to repeat it. And in a modern world, increasingly dismissive of risk, Halifax teaches catastrophe strikes fastest when you believe you're immune. One of the last survivors died at age 105. She held a hymn book when she survived. She carried that memory to her grave. Halifax didn't survive through miracles. They endured because no death was allowed to be meaningless. Every rebuilt home was a declaration we remember. And when a society chooses memory over blame, responsibility over denial, no matter how horrific the disaster, it can never destroy its dignity. Halifax wasn't just an accident. It was a necessary nightmare to awaken humanity. It proved that bombs don't need uranium to explode. Weapons of mass destruction can lie dormant inside weak systems. And when people stop asking questions, refuse to admit fault, catastrophe becomes inevitable. Halifax lost everything, but kept the most vital thing: memory. And in that memory, the world is warned, not to pity, but never to repeat. Halifax didn't die from war. It died from a society conditioned to believe that everything will be fine. A wrong horn, a delayed decision, a system without warnings. And then 900 tons of explosives taught humanity the true cost of negligence. This was no accident. It was a warning. A reminder that we still believe danger only happens to others. That if we don't hear an explosion, nothing is burning. But Halifax did explode. And if we don't remember, don't learn, and don't act, the next bomb might already be lying dormant in the heart of your own city, and it may already be counting down.